Sometimes Americans would start online discourse by saying, my grandfather is a Vietnam veteran. My father was deployed to Iraq. My cousin toured Afghanistan. I guess every contemporary American generation can be defined by a major war in a non-neighboring country. And I really wish from the bottom of my scrotum that Gen Z does not become the Iran war generation.
Japan is now stuck between China and America. It is a tight spot. So what can Japanese people gain from this conflict? And what kind of opportunities can Japanese people achieve in this political situation?
Breaking news, guys. Chinese government decided to ban all the seafood imports from Japan. And they are going really hard on this. They want to make sure Japan is not getting single pennies from there.
Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi just caused another international crisis. This time not with China, but with South Korea. And Seoul is furious. Taiwan, what happened? After being hammered by China for her extreme Taiwan remarks, Takaichi turned around and poked another sensitive wound. Dokdo, the island currency, as a symbol of resisting Japanese colonialism. Tokyo announced the expansion of its territorial sovereignty exhibition hall, basically claimed Dokdo as Japanese land. South Korea immediately summoned Japan's deputy ambassador and launched a strong protest. Then it got worse. Part 2. Rapid escalation. Japan's self-defense forces refused refueling support for Korea's Black Eagles flight team heading to Dubai. Seoul canceled its military band's participation in Japan's self-defense forces music festival. And on November 17, Korea suspended a joint naval rescue exercise that has existed since 1999, all because of Takaichi's hotline stance. Part 3. Why Koreans are so angry. Dokdo isn't just two rocks. For Koreans, it represents colonial trauma, national pride, and sovereignty. But in parliament, Takaichi declared, Takashima is Japan's inherent territory based on history and international law. To Koreans, that sounded like Japan's own militarism resurfacing. Part 4. The bigger picture. Takaichi has been in office for less than a month. No policy achievement, but multiple diplomatic fights. First China, now South Korea. Her strategy is simple but dangerous. Use nationalism to rally domestic support regardless of consequences. But provoking both neighbors at once? That's not strength, that's instability. When Japan's leader touches Taiwan and Dokdo in the same month, its Asia becomes more fragile. And this time, even Korea is saying enough is enough. I'm Luffy, doing a PhD in international relations. Like and follow to be stronger together.
Japan's prime minister really pissed China off this time. Her remarks sent China-Japan relations to a new low point. In just a few days, multiple Chinese government departments issued warnings to their citizens to avoid traveling to Japan, avoid studying in Japan. 2 Japanese films that were scheduled to hit the cinemas in China got cancelled. China's diplomat did not meet Japan's counterparts at the G20 meeting. Basically, China is sending the strongest warnings to Japan. So what happened? Because a few days ago, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said in Japan's parliament that they could use their military to intervene in any conflict that might occur in the Taiwan Strait. That crossed China's red line. Despite some Western forces always trying to create conflicts between the Chinese mainland and the Taiwan island and stoke separatism in Taiwan, no politicians in office would dare to make such a comment because their governments in fact agree that Taiwan is part of China. That's the foundation for their diplomatic relations with China. The US and China signed 3 communiques to acknowledge that. Well, you could argue that these countries use strategic ambiguity to maintain relations with both the Chinese mainland and Taiwan Island, but no high-level politicians in office would dare to say Taiwan is a country publicly, because it is not. No one will publicly say they would arm Taiwan Island for any conflicts. But Takashi, as the current head of state of Japan, said it. Very immature diplomatic behavior. The US didn't, Australia and Canada didn't. Maybe that's why they pushed Japan off the cliff. Let Takashi do the dirty work. You may ask, why is China so angry? Considering the past that Japan colonized Taiwan Island, committed multiple massacres in the Chinese mainland during its 14 years of invasion, Takashi's remarks not only interfere with China's domestic affairs, but it is also a sign of awakening far-right forces, and it is a sign of a potential war.
As an American who used to live in China and loved his time there in the country, I have some massive fucking news that is heartbreaking. But it's important that I inform you and keep you up to date, despite my personal feelings. So I'll be as unbiased as possible, jump straight into it. I'm biased. I just have to admit, in this video, in this topic, I have so much love for China because I lived there. I love the culture and the people. Look into the history of World War II and the sinister acts of Japan. You'll understand why this is more serious, and I don't know why it's not getting as much attention as it deserves. Conflict number 2, Poland has just had a railroad explosion, and they've all but outright accused Russia of now just straight up attacking their country. Now, they didn't use the direct words and verbiage saying, hey, Russia attacked us, but the Prime Minister said in a statement that this is sabotage and that foreign intelligence is involved. It's not a direct saying, hey, Russia attacked us, but is insinuating it, and that is very, very scary. For those of you that don't know, I used to strictly deal in geopolitics with my political commentary, and so I'll make more into this series, but this shit is obviously very concerning. Both of these things are. I am anti-war, pro-peace through and through. Obviously, I will always support the United States and China, the two countries that I have lived in, but I do not want anything bad to happen to Japan. We just need peace and de-escalation. For everyone to just love everyone, right? Like, you know, it's demoralizing, but it's important to stay informed. I'll keep you updated when I know more. My name is Hunter Howell. I'd really appreciate it.
Here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. When Japan escalates political tensions with China, it's not just diplomatic drama, it's Japan risking its own economic survival. So just within 3 days, 500,000 flights between China and Japan were cancelled, which is the largest wave since COVID. And Japan's business leaders immediately panicked. Why? Because its 3 core industries, autos, semiconductors, and machine tools, all depend on China. So first, autos. China is Japan's #1 export market. Over 30% of Japan's car export into China. Toyota, Honda, more than a quarter of global sales come from China. So if China sneezes, Japan's auto giant catch a fever. Number 2, semiconductor. 42% of Japan's semiconductor equipment export to China. Cut off China, and Japan loses its biggest customer overnight. Number 3, machine tools. China has been Japan's top overseas market for 15 years straight, making up over a quarter of external demand. So slowdowns in China equals empty order books in Japan. And that's just industry. The dependency runs deeper. China is Japan's largest trading partner in 2024 trade, plus over 13,000 Japanese companies operating in China, and more than half say that China remains one of the most important markets. So when Japan chooses confrontation, it's not symbolic, it's economic self-harm. Japan's political provocations aren't tough diplomacy, they are moves that threaten its own supply chain, core industries, and future growth.
We all know Japan is basically a colony of United States. Current Prime Minister Takaichi, she wants to keep playing the role of a leader of a colony for the United States. We can see the difference in reaction and the difference in friendliness between 2 meetings of Takaichi with Trump and Xi Jinping, respectively. If you look closely into it, you will see that Takaichi is basically fangirling Donald Trump. If you don't believe me, you can search Donald Trump, Takaichi, military speech on TikTok. And also Takaichi and Xi Jinping's meeting on TikTok. Just search it, you will see the difference I'm talking about. So the Japanese people, as of now, they are a little bit nationalistic due to the rise of right-wing ideologies resurgence of right-wing ideologies in Japan. So they like Takaichi for being strong on immigration, but they don't like to keep serving their colonial masters, aka United States of America. So what can Japanese people do and achieve from this political situation is that they can pretend to fight against China. They can pretend to have a tension with China as a pretext to rebuild their military, to regain their independence from the hands of United States. United States as of now will support Japan in whatever they do as long as they are sticking with the American hegemony idea of keeping Taiwan separate from mainland China. If Japan agrees to it, United States will possibly allow Japan to increase the military size, capabilities, and qualities. Meaning, Japan will have their own industrial complex to build military weapons at full scale, like Germany is doing at the moment, using Ukraine as a pretext to rebuild their military. Japan can benefit from the situation. If you play the cards right, Japan can finally start a revolution against America and reclaim their rightful sovereignty of the Japanese nation. Play your cards right, go along with the United States, pretend to fight a war with China, and doing so, you can get away from the grip of American hands over your country, over your sovereignty. The biggest slap in the face for the Japanese people is that most people on the world, they don't even know anything about Japanese emperor. They don't even know Japan has a king as the head of state. That's how Japan has become. We don't look at Japan. People don't look at Japan as one strong nation like before. We look at Japan as, oh, sure, right, that there's a United States military base and Japan has to do whatever the US tells them to do. Or they don't have US nuclear protection. Japan, what will you do? Will you choose to fight the right enemy or the wrong one and repeat the same atrocities of the past? Your choice. The whole world is watching you.
I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed that there's one war that US history classes usually just completely skip over. They spend a lot of time on World War I, even more time on World War II, say we went to Korea real quick, and then spend more time on Vietnam. And as a kid, I was like, well, I guess Korea must have been pretty uneventful. But that is not the case. In fact, the real reason that the US covers the history of this war is because we unalived 20% of the North Korean population. American pilots were complaining to their higher-ups that there were no more targets left to bomb. Every building over 2 stories tall was completely destroyed in the capital city, which was once called the Jerusalem of the East because it had so many Christian churches, but they were all destroyed by the US bombing campaign. And I mean, first, the US tried to install a far-right dictator, but nobody wanted to follow him because they knew he was a US puppet. So when it looked like Korea was about to become communist, they launched their bombing campaign, as well as a UN voting plan to divide the country in half. Once they installed this guy in the South, they helped him to commit some of the worst massacres in human history against anybody with a left-leaning ideology. And that's how North Korea became communist while South Korea became a US puppet state, which produces class-conscious movies and TV shows like Squid Game and Parasite because it's so tough to live there if you're working class.
Do you ever just learn something about history and it makes you angry all over again? Okay, me with China and Japan all the time. Basically, I just came back from Shanghai and it's one of my favorite cities in the world, but like as a Chinese person or like a Chinese American, Shanghai is cool, like if you like in a livable way, but not really as a tourist because there isn't that much to do, honestly. If you're looking for like ancient culture or just like history, like it's not really the place. There's so many better places like Xi'an or like Chengdu or something, or even like nature places. Shanghai is pretty just like modern and like kind of gentrified. But if you've ever been to Shanghai, the most popular area to stay in or like get food, coffee, whatever, is this place called the French Concession. And it is super nice, but it's also one of the most expensive places in China to live, in China in general, the whole country. In the mid 1800s, China lent out parts of Shanghai to other countries like the French, the British, international countries. And the French took over the French concession, and then they kept expanding it, loaning from China. And so currently the French concession is one of the oldest parts of Shanghai. A lot of it was destroyed because of Japanese invasion and just like modernization. But currently the French concession is one of the oldest parts, even though it doesn't really have like Chinese architecture. It's very like European architecture. But when the Japanese invaded, the French concession was a part of this like international war zone. So they weren't able to invade the French because they had a treaty with the French basically. And the French had their own military station there to protect the French, while every other part of Shanghai and further into Shanghai, they started in Shanghai, right? And then kept going in, the Japanese, and invaded and destroyed so much of China. But this one small part next to the river, the French concession, basically stayed intact the whole.
I mean, most foreigners, they cannot tell the difference between Chinese and Japanese. But with Chinese, we know we're totally different. Because if you know the history, in the past probably more than 1,000 years, China is the world's #1 economy worldwide. So make China great again is like, it's quite normal because every dynasty of China's in ancient times, we are #1 for a long time. So China, we do think, I mean, most Chinese they now tell you, but we do think we are #1 country worldwide. I mean, the young generation, they're more confident about this. But Japan is like, they will never say, we will surpass the United States, we will be the #1. So culturally, actually, it's totally different. So Chinese, but it's not a good message to some Western countries because China will not just join the existing system created by the United States, right? Personally, honestly, I think China will challenge the system, that's for sure. Because why not we need to reshape the system. I think that's what China is doing. So you can see, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Japan and the United States, they trade war, the technology war. And if we compare today's China and the United States, the trade war, the technology war is totally different. Because China think we're #1, American think we're #1, so that's what happened. I'm not quite optimistic about we can't get along with each other. Personally, I think in the next 10, even 20, even 30 years, these two big guys will compete again and again. So the international turbulence will happen again and again. But as a Chinese and the foreigners, I always said, my point of view is, I don't know America or China who will win. I definitely think these two countries will not go to war for sure. Will not go to war. I personally think, United States will not defend Taiwan. I mean, this is a very sensitive topic. Anyway, these two superpowers will not go to war, but China will reshape the global game. So if you are foreigners, you are not from the United States, or you're not from China, I think the smart way is you need to invest the two superpowers at the same time. I always told my foreign friends, if you go to the United States 10 times, 3 times a year, you will at least go to China at least 1 time a year. If you don't know what's happening, if someday China becomes the #1, and unfortunately your assets will be gone someday.